What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the RAD Lab, a podcast founded on delving deeper into topics to help you become a better athlete, and a platform for athletes, coaches, and clinicians from the community to share their stories and experiences to give you an idea of how you can become the best version of yourself. My name is Liam. I'm a strength and conditioning coach here at RAD, and I'm delighted to have you guys along for the ride as we share this journey towards further understanding the world of human performance. Now, today we are talking about training phases, in particular, how your training should look during the off-season period. And here with me to talk about this topic today, I have RADcente's Head of Performance and Education, the great man himself, Mr. Tim Welsh. How are you?
I'm going well, Haintz. Thanks very much for having me on. How are you going?
I'm going very well, mate. I'm very excited to crack on with this episode. To start things off, Welshie, maybe just give the great people out there a brief background as to who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I grew up down the coast in Warrnambool until I was 18 years old and had a nice little upbringing there, and wasn't lost, but sort of had not a massive idea of what I wanted to do post-school. Loved sport, played a lot of sport growing up. And Mum decided it was the best course of action to go and study sports science, which was awesome. And we're sort of tossing up whether to go and do a Masters of Teaching or a Masters of Physio post that as I started. Throughout, fell in love with strength training, and it became pretty clear that strength and conditioning would be the appropriate pathway. So then from there, just sort of threw myself into as many sort of placements and internships as I could related in the field, and then sort of bounced around a few clubs and different roles and things, but basically started at RAD 5 years ago when it was a tiny little organisation in Rad's backyard, and have been pretty excited to see it grow over the last 5 years and continue to grow. So my role at RAD now is pretty much to oversee all the programming and make sure that everyone's getting the best program possible, and then just to work with the different staff and interns and everything and try and educate everyone to the best extent as possible, making sure that everyone's sort of developing and growing at the same time.
Fantastic. And as part of your role, you're very, very big on the programming side of things as well when it comes to our athletes. So it's good to have you here to talk about exactly what we have here today. Welshie, just to start off, I think we should probably just provide the people a bit of a general overview of how one would typically structure a program. So obviously for starters, the most important thing that we probably need to look at is a needs analysis. So we need to obviously do a needs analysis to gather info about the athlete and their sport. Also understand, their performance and injury prevention requirements so they can be successful. What are the main things that you look to sort of find from a needs analysis, or what are you looking for the athlete? Yeah,
100%. So I'm very big on the scientific side of things, and I'm also very big on the everyday language sort of thing. So I like to try and simplify everything as much as possible and look at someone's sport and sort of see what they're doing throughout that game or whatever it ends up being. So there's multiple ways that you can go about that, whether it's looking at research articles that have like a GPS profile of a footy game or something like that. It could be as simple as flicking on the TV and having a watch if you hadn't experienced that sport or anything like that before, talking to the tactical coaches, talking to the athlete themselves, and sort of trying to blend as much of that information as you can together. But largely just looking at what are the main actions that they're doing in the sport, how long are they completing that, or like how many exposures can you expect to that, and what are the main sort of positions and movement patterns that they're going to have to get into. Obviously, there's going to be variance between different positions in different sports, but trying to get a big idea. So if you look at Australian rules football, for instance, we know that they should train a lot different to a marathon runner. So a marathon runner goes out and runs in a straight line for 42 kilometres, and they need to be obviously aerobically fit. An AFL player needs to be aerobically fit as well, but they also have to sprint maximally, accelerate, decelerate, change direction. They've got a very specific skill in terms of kicking. They've got a contact point of view. and they have to do it again and again. So yeah, I'd look at the main movement patterns and skills in the sport, trying to find a rough idea of how much they might be required to do that across the course of a game or a competition, and then try and simplify it as much as possible and work back from there, and then find movement patterns or capacity building exercises that are going to closely relate to that within the gym and on the field.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Let's stick with like a team sport athlete just for now, just to provide everyone with a bit more of an overview. But obviously, yeah, as we've said, so the fitness components there are going to be a super crucial thing to look at. So things like your strength, your power, your endurance, and obviously for most team sports, they are almost all encompassing in terms of the fitness components required to do well in the sport. As we said, it's not just being able to run fast or jump high or, have a really good aerobic base. It's actually, generally a combination of things. Obviously in terms of the technical components and that as well, that comes into it too. We need to make sure that the athletes are doing enough of the skills that they're doing and performing them, to be successful in their sport. So that comes into it there as well, of course. And then generally probably, I guess, later on during the training phases, we could start to look at, tactical components as well. So how a coach wants, a team to play and that kind of thing. But yeah, sticking with the team sports. So we've got the needs analysis there. Everything's ready to go. Now we're looking at actually creating the plan for the athlete. So a really common thing that we sort of see is obviously, again, for the team sport is working backwards, I suppose, from round one. So obviously we want to be, goal is to be peaked and to be ready for that first competition, during or at round one at the start of the season. How do we sort of build through the phases? Or let's define the training phases and then perhaps chat about how we build through those phases and start to become more specific heading into comp. So obviously at the very start, you can probably look at all the way back as I've just finished competition. So you've got like a sort of transition phase, which, for some athletes can be, 1 to 4 weeks, or even for some juniors could be upwards of 3 or 4 months nearly. So it can be very, very broad. But let's just put it for, say, like a amateur football player or something like that, or a team sport athlete, someone that we see quite a lot at RAD. How would you look to structure a transition phase for an athlete? So they've just come out of competition. What do they do next?
Yeah, 100%. So I think in most sports, they're a very long, grueling season. It's not like you're just going out and doing one race and then, or some sports it is, and then all of a sudden you've got months and months to recover. Most sort of winter sports, you've got competition every single weekend. You've got training a couple of times throughout the week. So when it comes to the end of the year, most players or athletes are pretty buggered. So this phase is really, really important to allow them to get some rest, let the body recover, but also mentally. So the taking away the strain of, all right, I've got to be at training at 5 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon or whatever like that, and trying to take the structure out of it as much as you can. Obviously, we still want some sort of guidance, but in this period, I'd sort of recommend them having a period of complete rest, if that's a couple of weeks, where they literally just do whatever they want. Obviously, most of the people we work with will still have work and family commitments and all that sort of stuff. But from a training point of view, trying to do as little as they can, recover, focus on their well-being and doing things that they like. And then from there, I'd try to reintroduce things really gradually, emphasising fun, I suppose. So obviously, like I've said, it can be mentally taxing. So if we give them a period of rest and then things that they enjoy, so it could be as simple as they go out and play some golf with mates, or they go and play some pick-up basketball, or go for a gentle kick of the footy, or play some casual netball, or whatever it ends up being. I think that if you can push the fun side of it, reduce the structure side of it, so not giving them set running with reps and sets and things to follow really, really closely, then that'll help them recover physically, hopefully, reintroduce them to sport in an enjoyable way.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for probably a lot of people out there. whether they've got knocked out during the final series or perhaps their team hasn't made finals or something like that. You hear, there's a lot of people that want to put in that work straight away. They want to go, all right, I'm using that as motivation. I'm getting straight back out on the track straight away, and I'm putting in that work, during the summer period if it's a winter sport or something like that, without actually realizing that, hey, maybe taking a little step back, going through that phase that we've just spoken about there, and actually giving yourself a bit of a rest, having that, you can still train, but having that nice sort of unstructured training and focusing on, a bit of rehab and that kind of thing, that can actually set you up for a better preparation heading into the season than just, trying to destroy your body again straight away and then sort of wash, rinse, repeat every season. So, super important, the transition phase. From there, obviously, we start to get into the prep phase. So you're looking at, a general prep phase for starters. So from there, we're, identifying and starting to work on individual deficiencies. So whether that be, body composition or perhaps some imbalances from side to side or something like that. And it's probably a good chance, Welshie, for us to start to develop some base qualities as well. So things like our endurance or maybe some muscle hypertrophy or something like that. But how would you structure a general prep phase for just an average field sport athlete?
Yeah, so I think this period, obviously, hopefully, you've had some sort of rest and started to do a little bit of gentle activity in the back end of that transition phase that's going to allow you to do some decent work in this general prep phase. So what I like to think of is moving from slow to fast and moving from general to specific and basically just starting at a really low intensity and gradually building that up. So that might be as simple as we start with some really basic runs, some longer, slower runs that if you go into your field sport athletes, we're not going straight into 100-meter sprints. We're allowing their body to readapt to build some volume at a lower intensity, and then basically over time just continuing to build that volume. So typically I'd say that general prep phase is pre-Christmas and the Christmas break as well for most footy, soccer, netball, basketball sort of athletes, and giving them plenty of time to build across that. And then towards the back end, or as we're going through it, just slowly layering different physical qualities or skills that we want to get more of. So an instance of that might be AFL or Australian rules football. We don't want players to be rolling back in trying to send off 50-meter barrels first session back. I'd encourage coaches to try and structure training in a way that we're doing not limiting kicks, but you're gradually building the volume of kicks and then gradually building the distance of the kicks as well. So hopefully, sort of 4 weeks in, they should be right to do some big barrels, but early on limiting that. Same process with the actual physical quality side of things. So hopefully the intensity is relatively low throughout training. We're still going to put in work, but you might start with, like, say, running is specifically at 70%. We slowly start to layer in some acceleration work that's just short and sharp, and might reach to like 90% of their max intensity. Same thing, slowly introducing change of direction work, slowly layering more contact work in there as well. So making sure that we're just slowly introducing all of these different aspects of footy, and building that real base in terms of aerobic capacity early on.
Absolutely. And given the time of year that we're in at the moment, really important one for everyone out there during that Christmas break, which was when this episode will go live.
Absolutely.
Making sure that we're trying to get all that as part of our current program right now. From there, Welshie, obviously we start to move out of that general prep phase. A lot of teams may come back from the Christmas break sort of late January, early February, and we start to look into more of like your specific prep, I suppose, from there. So whether that's only a couple of weeks before we move into pre-comp, or if some teams may extend that out a little bit further. But obviously, during that phase, it's much of the same really. We are just really looking to further develop those base qualities. But from there, as you said, we are looking to probably just increase specificity a little bit. So whether that's a little bit more kicking involved and sport specific movement patterns and that kind of thing. That's probably what we sort of want out of the specific phase. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And then, we're basically just trying to add more and more, as it says, specificity to everything. So then in a footy sense, that might come from, instead of having a specific running only drill, that becomes a football-based drill with lots of kicking and handballing and all that sort of stuff throughout. But the running's involved throughout that. So it becomes more change of direction exposure, more contact exposure, more kicking, all that sort of stuff. Same thing with netball. So obviously pre-Christmas, you often see the netballers wandering over to the footy oval and start to do some running. That's all well and good, but obviously they're there to play netball. So by this sort of stage, the netballers should be getting a lot of their running through the netball-based drills with those really big decelerations, changing direction, re-accelerating, all that sort of stuff. But I think that the really important stuff about the specific prep phase is ensuring that throughout that Christmas break, and this is why this is so important, that we continue to build the intensity and the volume so that on that first day back, as we roll into the specific prep phase, everyone's right to go and can sort of put their foot down and really build up the intensity and get the sport specific work in there.
Absolutely. And speaking of, putting your foot on the gas, that pretty much leads us into our pre-comp phase. So obviously this is probably also known as, I guess, the conversion phase. So this is where we've taken all of those sport-specific qualities that we've started to slowly develop, and now we're really honing in on them. So we're looking at, in terms of volume and intensity, or even just overall load, this is probably nearly the highest amount of load that the athlete will get in terms of training throughout the year. So obviously, as you go into a comp phase, training load, as we'll speak about, will start to decrease a little bit as as they're playing games and their game load increases. But for pre-comp phase, this is where it starts to get real. I suppose it starts to get quite intense. Minor competitions might be included, some small-sided games, things like that. Taking all those those qualities that we've been building on during our preparation phase, and really starting to push them forward.
Yeah, yep. I reckon, small-sided games would be massive in this little period. A lot of sort of ball-moving drills for whatever sport you're playing. And then towards the sort of back end of this is obviously where we're going to introduce, what am I thinking? The intra-club games and working towards practice games and all that sort of thing. Obviously we're slowly going to strip out the volume towards the back end of this, but making sure that people are pretty much ready to go for games, and we want them basically ready to the point where they're ready to roll out into competition.
Absolutely. And then, obviously to finish is our comp phase. So this is where we look to just try and maintain, or in some instances, we may potentially even try and develop those qualities that we've built up in that pre-comp phase in those other phases. As we spoke about, obviously the training load generally needs to drop just because of the high competition intensity. In terms of load, Welshie, so obviously you're looking at, quite a lot, even just in terms of, say, an AFL team or something like that. In terms of even kilometres on the track, that kind of thing, what would you be looking to do? So taking them from a pre-comp phase, let's talk about, the average sort of weekly volume that you might expect to see there, dropping that back in terms of training volume on the track during a competition phase. How would you see those differences? Yeah,
so I suppose you've got to account for the main thing that happens during the competition phase, which is a game. So say if you've got an AFL footballer that's running through the midfield and racking up 15 kilometres, they didn't have that load there or towards the back end of the pre-comp, but even during the specific prep, that's 15 Ks. It wasn't there. It's also their most intense work for the week because they're competing, and you're not going to go half-assed to a footy or think, I've got to conserve myself here. So when the footy's there or when the ball's there to be won, they're going flat out at it. So that 15 Ks might be a lot more volume, but it's also the most aggressive volume that anyone will do during that period. So then basically their trainings just become a little top up beyond that to make sure that they're recovered and they're right to go again for the weekend. So obviously the game is the main focus, and anything that we can do to get right for that game is really important.
Absolutely. And that rings true as well, I suppose, even for, as we've touched on, our court sport athletes as well. So while there'll certainly still be an increase in the Ks that they do on the weekend, of course, but for those athletes, their sport-specific movements are your jumping, your landing, your cutting, that kind of thing. And that's where they'll be looking to do that the most, during their games. So just keeping in mind for a lot of coaches and that as well, again, we want to develop those qualities even from a tactical standpoint, but just being mindful of how much load that we're actually putting on our athletes on the court during training as well. Because again, the ultimate goal of training is to prepare yourself for the game. That's why we're there. So we don't want to be cooking ourselves at training just for the sake of trying to get better when it doesn't actually ring true in the game.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's little things. Typically not aerobically, you're very rarely going to improve throughout the year. But I think as a result, there's still opportunities to really chase some gains. And if you're looking around bye weeks and things like that, taking every opportunity to improve that's still there, just being smart with it. Yeah, so in the gym, for instance, you might have big sessions midweek where we're still lifting heavy and going after it. Just because we're in season, it doesn't mean that we're all of a sudden going back into a shell and saying, all right, we've just got to get through the season, because if you do that, you're likely going to get weaker and more brittle. Whereas if you are able to continue to push the needle in that regard, then hopefully we can continue to improve in season. It's probably more just going to be like your speed and power and strength qualities that are more likely to improve rather than the aerobic base. You can't really work on that too much without throwing too much volume in season.
Absolutely. In terms of training in the gym, Welshie, now obviously, there's a hell of a lot more that we can get into in terms of the resistance side of things between phases. But let's just say, for example, even where we are now, so during the general prep phase for, say, a field sport athlete as an example, how does their resistance training, even in terms of a weekly structure, is it different compared to, say, in competition versus a general prep phase or something like that? Or what are the differences between the two, if any?
Yep, there's plenty of differences. So like we're saying with the on-field stuff, as we're not in that competition phase, it's okay to have a little bit of soreness and fatigue here and there. So that means that to improve, you need to induce some sort of fatigue. So our off season and coming into the general prep and specific prep, that's our opportunity to improve. So if as a result we get a little bit more soreness, then that's completely fine. So in terms of gym work in that, if we're going to do some eccentric, like heavy eccentric work, it'll be in this phase. We're happy to have a little bit more volume in there if someone's chasing, trying to get a little bit bigger. That's all well and good. And it's also an opportunity to sort of go back and review technique as well and sort of almost look at it as a fresh start at the start of off-season. So that's something that we do here and work back to the most basic lifts and continue to build throughout the year. In terms of the weekly structure, it changes massively as well. As I'm saying, we've got an opportunity not to be sore, but to induce a little bit of soreness. So in this instance, we'd typically roll back to sort of 2 bigger total body sessions and 1 more moderate sort of total body session that have more volume in there than we would see in season. So those total body sessions will still have big compound lifts in there. They'll have little accessory or sort of injury prevention-y type exercises in there. As we work towards the season and more in season, obviously we're going to have a little bit more of a focus on power. So we want to get everyone moving nice and quick. So I think right now is a little bit slower and more of a grind, trying to build that muscle and strength. Closer to the season, we're going to move more into the power stuff. And then as we're in season, the weekly structure we'd normally revert to, say for an AFL player, because it's quite a common one. We'd use Monday or their first session post game as an opportunity. The legs are typically going to be pretty sore, so we'll do a fair bit with lower body recovery stuff, get everything moving again. There'll still be some strength aspect in there, but a lot of it is just trying to freshen everything up and get their legs moving again. But then in that instance, we've got an opportunity to chase upper body strength as long as they're fit and healthy in that regard. So then we can say, all right, that's our big upper body session and lower body recovery sort of stuff. Towards the middle of the week is when we'd have our main total body, I suppose, strength and power session. So in that, you'd have any, if you're going to do a big squat for the week or a big deadlift or whatever it is, a big lower body lift for the week would be in that session. And acknowledging that we can sort of push the weight and the intensity with that a little bit. And then towards the back end of the week, as they're getting ready for a game or competition again, we don't want to go ruining them before the weekend. And it's an interesting one because people, I feel like there's two boats of people. Some that'll be along the lines of, I don't like doing leg weights in season and will try and avoid it as much as they can. Whereas if they build that tolerance during the off season and building into it, then they'll be fine. There's also others that are just workhorses and happy to do as much as they can sort of leading into the weekend. And we sort of need to pull them back a little bit and say, while you might feel good, you're still inducing some sort of fatigue on your body, like direct muscles, but largely nervous system wise. So if we can reduce the weight and really push the speed of things, then that's going to get nervous system going. It'll keep all the muscles and joints moving freely and get the athlete really up and about, ready for the weekend. So we'd do like typically a primer session on a Friday or even on game day, and really push the speed of things and have a lightweight. So just being really specific with the exercise selection and encouraging the athletes to go a lightweight.
Absolutely. Awesome. Really, really cool stuff. Now, Welshie, obviously we've touched a lot on our, field sport athletes and a bit on our court sport athletes as well. But as we know, there are a ton of different athletes out there. And so a lot of this will apply to them as well, but perhaps, at different times of the year or, in their own way for their specific sport. Let's just say, for example, we've got, I don't know, someone like who's a national level runner, right? So we'll go, quite high up. Obviously, for them, things like change of direction and things like that. Say if they're a medium to long distance national runner. For them, things like your change of direction and your agility are probably not very high on the needs analysis list. But how would you structure their year or their training compared to someone like a team sport athlete, in the sense that obviously they want to be peaked for certain events, but perhaps that they don't really need to, I guess, hold that level of, I suppose, that level of competition for an extended period of time. They might only have to really show their true potential in patches. How would you structure that for, let's just say, for this athlete here as an example, for a track athlete?
Yeah, there's still going to follow a very, very similar process in that we'll find where their competitions are and all the sort of key events across the course of the year and the season, and we'll just go through that way. And then we need to work backwards from there to say, all right, how long do we need to build the intensity in this phase? How long do we need to continue to work or hold that intensity? So from that sort of point of view, there will be phases where they have an extended period of time off. So they might race and then they might race again 12 or even 20 weeks later. So during that phase, it'd be silly to keep up that massive intensity both in the gym and on the track. So it might be a case of, all right, let's go through an off season, look at building some muscle or doing whatever they need to do where we can really push build volume and push the intensity over time. Then strip back the volume, introduce some sort of power stuff and get them peaking for their event. And then it might be a case of, all right, we've got a race in 12 weeks or 14 weeks or whatever it ends up being. Let's give them a little rest, deload a little bit, and sort of almost reset and go through mini little phases building back into that. And it's not as though you need to say, all right, this is the transition phase, this needs to go for 4 weeks, this is the pre-competition phase, this needs to go for X amount of time. It might just be a case of everything becomes a little bit of a hybrid, and we spend a couple of weeks focusing on building volume, a couple of weeks backing off the volume and then building the intensity, and then it might be, all right, let's get them peaked and ready to go and focus a little bit more on recovery.
Absolutely. A sense of fluidity throughout the phases, some might say.
I like it.
Yeah, fantastic. So again, obviously, the philosophy of the training phases, is still put into focus there, like it's still being used. However, it can just be modified or tweaked depending on the sport or even potentially the athlete themselves. Just to suit them. In this sense, obviously, as we said, working back from the most important event or, when they need to be peaked, and just sort of, moving through those phases, having the volume just move up and down as they need, just to make sure that they're primed and ready. Welshie, is there anything else you would like to touch on about training phases or anything else that's come into your head during this podcast?
Not particularly. I was just sort of thinking along the lines of general and broad advice for those that are now going into that sort of Christmas period, and just some sort of general tips, I suppose. So obviously we talk about coming back to that pre-competition phase, whether it's sort of late Jan or early Feb for some clubs, making sure that we use this as a real springboard so that you can roll back into your club and really start to train hard, and specifically in that phase. So I would say right now is a really important period. So obviously we've built a decent base over that general prep phase. We need to continue that on. So hopefully you've got some sort of running or guidance from your club. If you don't, obviously you can reach out and we can sort of put you in touch with some resources. But if you're a typical sort of footy netball player, we'd sort of recommend doing sort of 2 to 3 runs and 2 to 3 strength per week, trying to maintain some sort of intensity, but also maintaining any sort of sport-specific skills that you've sort of built up during that general prep phase. So if you're a footy player, we don't want you to slowly build up the distance that you're kicking over this period, then not go and touch your footy for the next 6 weeks and then rock back up to training and try and unleash those barrels. We want you to keep on being smart with keeping that kicking involved, keeping the change of direction sort of stuff involved, all the deceleration, any contact stuff. So we want to basically keep on completing footy training and not just go to that running mentality or I just need to get really fit mentality. I think the biggest thing is maintaining some sort of sport-specific work and obviously maintaining intensity through this period as well.
Absolutely. It's a pretty simple recipe, just showing up, putting in the work and reaping the rewards.
Absolutely.
Welshie, we have one more segment to go through for the show. It is the people's favourite segment. They know what's coming. It is the couch review. Now, we have had some mixed reviews recently. We've had some giving it upwards of 9s and some only being around the 6s or 7s. So I trust your ability to review the couch, given your extensive knowledge with it thus far.
Yep.
However, I'm interested to know what you think. So let's start off. Let's talk about ergonomics. So how you're sitting right now. How are you feeling?
I like it. I feel like I've got sort of 2 modes on a couch. So at home we've got the ottoman or whatever it is, the big long length of couch where you can sort of lay up and put your feet up. I really appreciate that. Not present here, but that's not to say it's not comfortable.
Points taken away for that, or just perhaps points not given?
I think it needs to be, probably points not given. I think it needs to be practical in this space, that we're not taking up the whole space with couches, which we sort of are. But I think it's as an upright couch, the way that it presents, is quite good in that regard, and I'd probably give it sort of like a 6.5 or 7.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Talk to me about the material. So is this a material that you're getting down with?
I enjoy it. I am a big fan of that sort of suede felt material. I've been looking at couches for a home. We're building a house, so when we move in, trying to get a new couch. And I really like that suede. I feel as though this, as a medium sort of price point couch, I like the suede aspect to it, but it's not really upper end. I'd give it a sort of middle end. I like the material though, so I'd probably give that about a 6.
Okay.
Yep.
Talk to me about the actual comfort of the couch. So are you a plush couch guy or
Yes.
are you a firm couch guy?
Very much a plush.
You are the plush. So how does this stack up with that in mind?
It's the cushions give a fair bit. I like that aspect to it. It's not super soft. I like sort of almost sinking into a couch. I'd probably give that about a 6.
Okay.
Yep.
A brand new little factor that we've just made up on the spot right now, which I probably should have thought of about 4 episodes ago. Colour. Talk to me about the colour. Do you like the colour of the couch? For those that have the viewing pleasure on YouTube at the moment, you'll know what we're talking about. But for those who don't, Welsh, you just describe the colour to me.
So it's sort of like, I'd say like almost an olivey green. It's sort of like it's not super dark, but there's a darkness about it.
Nice deep tone.
Yeah. I like it. Probably. I've actually got the ideal couch in mind at the moment.
And you're
so
just
I'm
comparing.
Yeah,
interesting. That's a good way to do it.
Ironically, the one I'm thinking of is a green, but it's a much darker sort of suede. I don't mind it. I'd probably give it a 7, I reckon.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. With all that being said then, just summing it up in one number, what is the overall review for our couch?
I think just sort of averaging out the numbers that I've given, it's probably about a 6.5.
6.5 out of 10. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's, I think, just about the harshest review we've had so far.
I must say
however, I appreciate the realism.
Yeah, I'm a very, when it comes to things like this, I'm a very quality guy. So the current couch we have was quite expensive, and the one that we're going to get is quite expensive and made of lush materials, and just got to compare it to the best, I suppose.
That's fair enough. Well, there you go, the couch connoisseur. Tim Welsh, thank you for your time today, Welshie.
Thanks for having me, Haintz.
Wonderful. That is all we do have time for, though, guys. Thanks to all of you guys out there for coming along for this one. We've got plenty more stuff lined up for you guys heading into 2023, so we are looking forward to all of that. But that is it for today, so thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are, and we'll see you back in the lab for the next episode very soon.